Hello and welcome to the Between Dreams podcast. My name is Chris Ruggiero. We're doing a live recording today with special guest, and I love how I feel like in the past I would introduce people and they would have kind of one title, and these days it seems like a lot of my friends and entertainers and creators are adding a lot of titles onto what they do, which I think is incredible. Ryan Kane is the guest today. I know him from years ago in Magic World as a performer, but he just wrote his new book called Out of Stock, and it is about, well, let's bring him up and we'll talk about what this book is all about and what he's up to. So here he is. It's Ryan Kane. Hello.
Hi. Good. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, your shirt is also on your wall, it kind of looks like.
Always, yeah. Well, I need to blend in as best I can. I hear that's what's desirable for this new medium, correct?
Yeah, they say some people try to pop it for the camera, but you just say, what if I just am part of the wall?
Yeah, the people ask me if I'm busy. I go, yes, I am busy. I'm nothing but busy right now. So
Well, cool. So thanks for hopping on, Sue. So we have known each other for many years, but like in weird kind of like crossing of circles.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend from back east, and then you were in town. We did a show together where you're like the MC. That's when we first met. It's been a while. We've only like hung out in person, I think, like once or maybe twice. But
yeah, I love that though, of how many friends I have, especially performers, because everyone's like always on, typically on the road or doing gigs or something. And I love how like I'm such good friends with people. And then when I think about it, I'm like, I've only like hung out with you for like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But it's like, people, it's so cool. And then especially with virtual stuff, it's been really cool. I've been talking and interacting with people more than ever.
I've got Zoom meetups that happen nightly with certain friends, and it's like, wow, this is a person that we'd be at the same party, but we never really talked, and now I hang out with you like every week playing trivia. It's just funny who's in your circle now.
It's so cool. So let's get into it. You wrote this book called Out of Stock, and it's kind of focused on primarily in like the magician world of, as we were just talking about this before, most magicians, but also every type of entertainer or person in any way. You start developing your style by mimicking the people who you look up to. It happens in music. It happens in social interactions, like it happens in like babies learning how to talk. So I think it was like I wanted to open it up and say like inherently that's how people learn things, by mimicking the people that they look up to and like how they want to be. And then there comes a time where some people then lean on that, and then they're like, oh, this works, I'm never going to change.
Yeah,
and
totally.
then you've obviously put a lot of value on, cool, yeah, that's important. You're going to learn that stuff. And then how do we leverage out of that, of mimicking, whether you're a magician or anything else in the world, of developing your own style? So I'll let you kind of like lead into that a little bit, of how did you, there's a lot of aspects of entertainment and creativity and magic in particular that you could dig into. Why did you select and really think it was the most valuable to help people dig themselves out of that crutch of relying on stock?
Yeah, 100%. So stock material is very prevalent in magic. And I would also say other variety arts such as jugglers and acrobats and stuff, street performers as well. There's a lot of just like standard lines that everyone uses. And again, you start off when you're young. And then the problem is like, you never get rid of them. They just kind of linger in your act for the longest time. And the reason I chose this as kind of the topic for the book was it's the journey that I've actually gone on. Like when you and I met, I had a lot of stock material in my show. And I was very much kind of like a clone of some of the other great street performers that came before me. I had some lines that were mine and unique things, but like there were these stock lines really held me back. So I got serious a couple of years ago about like, I want to get rid of these. So I started systematically going through my act and finding them and trying to figure out, okay, what is the stock line doing? Why did I add this to my show? And then just writing replacements for them. And slowly but surely, I just got rid of dozens and dozens of hack lines that weren't mine and replaced them with an act that I can genuinely feel proud of now. I'm not really a comedian. I'm a magician. And I'm not some avant-garde artist. Like I do a corporate clean magic show, but at least the lines that I'm saying have my point of view. They're more unique to myself, etc. So that's kind of why I chose this as the topic. Is I've done this. This is something I want to do. And also, there's no book that really focuses in on this very, very specific issue. A lot of magic books and performance books will tell you to create your own material, but nobody really tells you necessarily how, particularly for magicians, where I say all the time, like magicians get paid way too early. We start making money just by having a show and somebody will hire you for your birthday party or something. You start making real money really quickly. And then nobody steps in to be like, all right, but you're still using all these kind of like training wheel material. Like, why are you still doing this? So you have performers that have been very successful for decades, 20, 30 years, but they still have got these like bad, really bad old like lines that go back to vaudeville are still in their act. So how do you tell someone like that, like, look, I'm not trying to get rid of your entire show. You don't have to start from scratch, but how do we adjust your show and improve it at this very basic level at speed? So you don't have to stop. You can just keep performing. So that's the reason for the book, and that's what it's about. It's called Out of Stock, A Magician's Guide to Writing Your Own Lines. But it really does, it can apply to a lot of things. If you're using generic material, this will help you remove that.
So let's go back to that a little bit of the idea of there's a lot of, and again, there's going to be a lot of people, there's going to be a lot of magicians listening right now, of course. And there's going to be a lot of other people who are going to have these aha moments of they're going to realize that this is relevant to so many other things. And I think the fundamental level of this is at some point, a lot of performers and people, we've all seen them, just do go their entire career. They're like, no, this show works. I'm not going to risk doing something new because I know this stock line or this hacky bit or whatever, it does work, quote work.
Yeah.
And so in order to realize that, oh yeah, this works, but I might not actually be delivering the audience the best experience that I can, takes, when you were saying that, I thought of one phrase, and that was self-awareness of, yeah, this is working, but I need to see bigger than this moment working. And from a bird's eye view, I like thinking about things from a bird's eye view, like, oh yeah, that worked kind of. But if we like zoom out, we could see how that audience is interacting. And oh, we're missing that. Like, oh, there was like, maybe there didn't need to be a line right there, and somebody in the audience was doing something funny and you didn't need a line, but you were so stuck on that script of your show, you missed this opportunity to create a real moment. And I think that all ties into, instead of relying on these stock lines, is to be in that moment and be willing to take the risk of, oh yeah, the stock line works, but I'm going to take a risk. And it might crash and burn, and it will.
Yeah,
it's like, from you've done enough shows, like most of the time they crash and burn, but then when they work, the payoff is so much exponentially better that it's worth it. So, go ahead.
The process, there's a lot you touched on there that I think is fantastic. And yeah, the process of developing material, you are taking a risk and you will get burned sometimes, but that's part of the process, right? Like magicians get stuck at never getting into like trying out new materials. Like, it's not really that scary. It's just that first leap of faith. And the zooming out, I think, is really, really smart of, yeah, it worked in the moment, but afterwards, what are people saying about your show? Are they just saying, oh, he's just like every other magician, right? Or, oh, that was great, but he wasn't in the moment. He was just so scripted. Those are things that you only really get from zooming out. And if you have a stock line in your show, even if 99% of the rest of your show is completely original, the moment you say one stock line, now I, as a viewer, if I recognize it, I'm going, well, what else did this person steal, right? So you're cheapening your entire act just by doing that, stealing one line.
So what is so we'll double down into this. It's like right now somebody's listening that's like, yeah, I'm in. So then what's so again, and you kind of brought this up at the beginning. Yeah, there's a lot of people that, and I think it goes down to a fundamental, kind of a base layer thing of this, be creative.
Right. Yeah. Everyone's
what does that mean?
Yeah. Right. How do you do it? Right. So it's 5 steps is essentially what I use to get rid of stock lines. And step 1 is identifying them. And the way to do that is you just listen to your show, audio, like a live recording of it. You write down every stock line that you say, and you write down what happened before the stock line. Because sometimes coming back to some of the other stuff there of like, maybe you didn't even need a line there, right? Can you just get rid of it without replacing it? When you and I first met, I was really hyper responsive to the audience. So I would, if someone sneezed in the 4th row, I felt like I had to respond to that. And as I've matured as a performer, I go, I actually don't, I can let that go. I don't need a line there. So that can help it. So once you have your whole list of like every stock line that you say in your show, then you go through and you're going to analyze each stock line to figure out what the context is, which is, why did I add this to the show? Most stock lines are functional. They serve problems. They address situations, characters, issues, interruptions, which are common to whatever you're doing, right? So for magicians, it's things like picking a card or having a trick not work or a joke not land. I have a friend who works in bartending. His wife's a realtor, and they bought the book just to support me. And they're like, we don't do magic, but some of this stuff really applies like to realtors. Apparently steal a bunch of lines all the time. And they're like, wow, we can do this to my job too. But in magic, there are very specific things that we're always dealing with. And so you want to ask yourself, why did I add this line? What does it do? Once you do that, you then get some insight into step 3, which is, okay, am I saying this line every show, or am I just saying it in response to things? Is it base script or reactionary? Which is important only because I think you want to focus mostly on fixing your base script. So then you get to step 4, and by that point, you should have all your stock lines. You know what you're saying before them. You know what the context is. You know what they're addressing, and you also know which are your base scripts. So you're going to focus on those. And now you have to write a new stock line based on that context, right? You don't want to try to look at a line. So I'll use an example of there's a very hacky stock line where it's like, hello, I've been Ryan Kane. If you joined the show, I've been Ryan Kane. If you didn't enjoy the show, I've been David Copperfield. Right? Very old, hacky stock line. The context of that line is I need a laugh to end my show on, right? And I want to repeat my name because that's smart. Those are good things that as a performer, you're going to want to communicate at the end of the show. Stock lines are smart. Like, there's a reason we add them, right? So now you're going to write 10 new ideas to achieve that context. You don't want to look at the original joke, because then you'll get distracted. You'll be like, that joke, you didn't add this to your show because you wanted to have a joke about David Copperfield or compare yourself. You added it because you wanted to repeat your name at the end of your show. So you're going to write down 10 funny ideas to do that. And if funny is scary to you, don't think of it as funny, think of it as interesting. What are 10 interesting ways to do that? And most of these ideas are going to be bad. But if you've been stealing material your entire career, you probably have a sense of what's funny. You probably have a decent sense of what's good. So when you're when you present yourself with these 10 ideas, you will be able to find the one that's the funniest. And one joke will always be the funniest among them. That's just creativity is relative. When you relate one joke to the other, one's going to be the funniest. And now you know what angle to go with. So you take that one, you polish it up a little bit. And that's step 5, is I tell you a little bit more about how to take like kind of a gem of an idea and flesh it out and make it into an actual joke. And then you just, next time you do your show, next time you encounter that situation or hit that point in your script, you say the new line. And now you also invest in that feedback loop, which is, again, if you're going to do new material, you have to start listening to your show and risk bombing and be like, that didn't get as good. But you know what? I also thought up this alternative punchline. Now we'll do that. And then after a while, you'll replace it. And that's exactly what I did to get rid of tons of lines in my show. And it's a simple process. And what I've kind of done is weaponized it down to this very specific issue of replacing hack stuff, stolen lines, stock lines in a variety performer show. So that's a very, very quick rundown of what the book is. And that's just part 1 of the book that gets into some other stuff by the end too.
Yeah, and I'll go back into that. It's like thinking about that. If I would position myself back into thinking about, like, if I wanted to actually utilize this and start working on stuff, I would still instantly be like, well, that's so scary because I have all these things that are going to work. And then the first thing that I thought about right there was, one of the things that I used to try to kind of like in general kind of think about when I was like trying to work on new ideas and really like make new things work was you don't need to, this isn't like the entire show. Like tomorrow you drop all your show and come up with a new thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so like for me, it was like really like, okay, I'm going to try this new thing. Like I have 45 minutes that I'm doing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to try this new thing for like 3 minutes. It
Yeah.
might eventually turn into a thing that's 8 minutes, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
commit to it till I know that like the base premise
Mm-hmm.
of it works. Test it. And also like if it really is crashing and burning, again, from the bird's eye view, I can bail on the whole bit
Yep. Yep.
after a minute and say, oh, that was terrifying. Now I'm going
Oh,
to go
I'm
back.
terrified of doing new material, but I do it all the time. And you say 3 minutes. I would never do 3 minutes of new material. I would craft, if I was like, I want to do a 3 minute routine, and even if it was in my head already, I would break it down to like 30 seconds and just drop that in, just like, what's the best 30 seconds of this? And then and I'd be terrified that whole time. But you know what? I'm going to watch it back. I'm gonna look it over, and then okay, that works. Now I add on another 10 seconds, and then another joke, and then build up to 3. That I'm always doing that in modular ways of trying out new material. And it's important to always have new lines in your show. It doesn't have to be a whole new trick. It can just be one new line, which is what the book is about. Of just, you're not changing your entire cups and balls routine. You're just not using this one joke. You're replacing it with one thing. Even if that joke bombs, your whole trick isn't going to bomb. Like it's one little thing. So very, very low risk.
What do you say to people who are maybe, as you said, kind of at the beginning, where it's like, oh, somebody might not feel like they're inherently funny, which is why they've utilized these other things, or maybe they'd feel like they're not a good originality, like an original writer for crafting.
Right.
Things.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. Number one is a lot of this is what I'm talking about is very much aimed at the professional or like the magic enthusiast who's really been doing this for quite some time. If you're just getting into magic, do Invisible Deck with all the standard lines. Like, you need to understand what a good magic trick is and what a good joke is before you start writing your own stuff. That's fine, right? Those things are out there. But at a certain point, once you start doing magic for long enough, you need to start getting away from that, right? If booking your show involves a W-9 form, like, you're no longer a beginner. You can write your own lines, and I think you should hold yourself to that new standard. So that's that. As for the stress of I don't know how to write a line. I don't know how to write something funny. Just try it. Trust me. Like, I've had, before I released the book, I had a couple of people test drive the process. And these are people that I don't consider to be, I hope they're not listening, but they're not like the most hilarious performers, right? But that's kind of why I sent them out. I was like, I want to see if what you guys can come up with. And they came up with some great ideas. They surprised themselves, right? And it takes 30 minutes to sit down and just write down 10 ideas. And again, most of them are going to be bad. That's the whole point of it. Is I picture that every bad idea that I put down on the page is just one step closer to that good idea. The goal is to fill up the page with fresh new things, and just so that then you can look back at it and be like, oh, that one right there, that's interesting, right? And then that can steer you in the new direction. This is really the secret behind all art. Like, you don't see the wastebasket behind, the greatest songs that you've ever heard or the greatest jokes. Like, you got to get friendly with the wastebasket, and it's better to do it now in your own home, where by the time you do say that joke online or in your show, you're like, you know what? That's the best of 10. I have some confidence in that. It beat out a bunch of other ones. So you can have more confidence, and then you can run it by your friends, right? Like, I run everything by my girlfriend. Twitter, sometimes I'll run new jokes through Twitter. A little bit harder to do with stuff for magic shows, because there's usually so much more stuff going on. But there's places to try things out, and then you add it to your show and get it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because so many times what I would do was just not write things. Or because I was so dependent upon, my show never really had like written jokes. because I like always, because I wasn't, same thing, I like wasn't like a stand-up comedian. I would
But you
want to,
said funny things on stage, right? Like you would on
yeah,
stage in the moment create
exactly.
things. So, and I think most performers, most magicians do that, right? Like if there's no fourth wall in your performance, so you're interacting with people, you're stumbling on funny things all the time. It's the matter of just sitting down and doing that at home. Like you can do that and just think about, like, again, looking at that context of the joke and put yourself in that position. If I was standing on stage during this problem right now, what would I say? And just write 10 different things you'd say, and then you're going to look down and pick the funniest one. That's I think most performers don't sit down and write a script. Most magic acts, most juggling acts, I think, are built in real time in front of the audience. That's fine, but you are going to have to sit down and write some stuff. You need a basis. And the book runs through it. It starts with stock lines, and then it moves on in the middle to how do you react to the things that your audiences are saying? How do you not act generically to things, right? Like people, you know, when you say hello to somebody and they say, hey, my name is Luke, do you make a Star Wars joke? Should you do that? Because he's probably heard a Star Wars joke, and most people in your audience have, right? But as a performer, you're like, I got a joke, and you say it. I don't think you should. And then by the end of the book, I'm really talking about how do you start building material from scratch? What do you take your base script, the thing, you know, you buy the trick. It comes with, in magic, it's called patter. I hate the term. I only use it once in the book. And how do you take that and transform into something more original, right? So it starts with stock lines and then moves into how do you step away from being original? How do you really start thinking about what are you communicating to your audience in social situations, in your show and everything?
Yeah, so I have kind of two things on that. Is like, I think the first one is how do you, so I think sitting at home writing, we can often fall, whether it's a joke or a bit or anything, we can often really fall in love with that thing, and we love it. And I think that's why I relied so heavily on not doing this, of writing things, because every time I wrote something and committed to it, or like made a video to play back in a show, it's like a really commitment because you can't change it on the fly. Like when you build a video to play in your show, it's like you can't obviously adapt to how the audience is playing. And so many times my dumb idea that I was like, oh, this is clever. And it was clever because I'm a performer and I wasn't in the mind of the audience. So that was kind of, I think that just probably answered the thing. I was thinking about what was cool for me instead of putting myself in the position of the audience. And the second half of that, which is probably a little bit more of a better question that you could answer, is how do you develop? So there's some people who do make the right decisions very often, probably because they've practiced a lot and they've developed that, we'll call it the intuition to choose the right line.
Right. Yeah.
And they understand because they can really position themselves out of, I like this and I care about this, to, I think I know my audience so well that I know that they're going to like this. So the question in there is, how do you develop, besides just like doing it a bunch, because that's scary. I'm like, that doesn't help me right now. Like you telling me in 2 years of me doing this, it's going to be good. I'm like, nope, that sucks. I don't want to do that. I want it to be now, and I want to be better at this now. So how do I get faster at being intuitively making those right decisions?
Wow. So there's two things there. One is how do you respond to things on stage? I think having some of the tips in the book, I think immediately just go in the back of your mind of like, don't do this, you know, think about these types of things. But unfortunately, a lot of that does come from experience. And if not that, preparation. I'm not particularly good at thinking on my feet. I'm not great at improv, but on stage, it really does feel like I'm reacting to things and have lines for everything. And the reason is because I did my homework and I brainstormed a lot of situations for what could possibly happen. So I have jokes ready for that. And then the more you write, the better your kind of hit percentage gets. And also you can start finding, I recycle things into new routines quite often. So I perform at Pier 39 which I can gather a crowd, and it's very flexible. And I use that very much to try out new material. And so as soon as the show gets too good, then I actually break it and I put something new in. So there's always like, I'm never doing my full show. So I can take like, all right, this is a new card trick that is very, very new, but I'm going to do all the jokes for card tricks from other routines because I know that works. So even the first time I debut it, it'll have all this other new stuff. So if you're trying to try out new material, that's always a great way to do it, is just, piece things together and just, perform. The more you perform, the more you write, the better you're going to get at it. I know that's not the answer anybody wants to hear, but what I can say is it's a lot easier to get into this than you seem, right? Like when you sit down at a page and tell yourself, I'm going to write down 10 different sentences, and most of them are going to be bad, right? And you see it less as like trying to, lay a golden egg, as opposed to like sifting through like sand to get gold. I'm from California, so like everything has to be panning for gold. Was my entire fourth grade.
You also live in 1950.
I also live in 1950. Yeah. But yeah, like you're trying to sift through to find the gems. That's so much better, because then again, I like writing down a bad line that I know I'm not going to use, because it's like, cool, that's out of my system. Now I can move on to something else. And 10 is just a good, it's not like a hard and fast rule, but it generally gives you a good outlook. I'll do this for things. It took 70 something attempts to come up with a title for the book, and still my friend ended up figuring that out, right? I've got 40, my list for like, there's a trick in my show called Tossed Out Deck, which is a thing magicians will know. And I think I'm up to like 52 different attempts at jokes for that, just to cover like there's a lot of procedure. So like, what are different jokes for saying, for getting people on stage? What happens if they don't, they forget their card, things like that, right? It's about anticipating those ideas. I have a thing where coming back to like preparing and how do you feel, how do you respond on stage correctly or in a confident manner. I have a thing in my show where I have somebody steal a wallet. I have a kid steal a man's wallet, and I wrote jokes for every possible situation I could imagine. So the guy doesn't have a wallet. His wife has a wallet. His wallet is made of duct tape. His wallet is just a band of money. He just has loose cash. I wrote up jokes for every possible situation. I haven't used some of them, and I've been doing this routine for years. But like I had them. I wrote them. I sat down. I prepared for them. So that type of thing is really helpful for feeling like you are being like spontaneous on stage. A lot of it is just, I thought of it ahead of time. And now when I'm in that moment on stage, it's easier to react and say something funny on stage when you already have a line in your head that you already prepared, because then in that moment, if I think of another funny line, right, something else happens, and I think to myself, now I'm like, all right, I just had a funny thought, but is it funnier than the other line that I already prepared? Right now, again, you're just comparing it. Creativity is relative, right? Normally, you just say the line that you just thought of because you have nothing else. But if I already have another line in my head that I already wrote, and I'm like, actually, this new line is funnier than that, I'm going to say it. Now I can say it with more confidence, right? Or maybe it's like, that's not as good as my original thing, so I don't. It's the same process, just done live on stage. And that's what I do on stage, is I just got tons of, I'm crazy is what this means, but also a whole list of different lines in my head that I can just filter through. And the difference is they're mine. They're not stock lines like when I started off. I'm not saying you, sir, if in fact that is your real name, right? If someone gets up to leave during my show, I'm not saying, where are you going? I didn't walk away when you got here, I'm saying you can't leave early. There might be a post-credit scene. You'll never know what happens to Thanos, and like there's different things that you can do now that are just more unique, more genuine to who I am and what I'm representing than hack stuff.
Yeah. And in that idea, so when you're talking about that, in that thing of like you cycling this idea of like, oh, something just happened. I had a line prepared that maybe would work, but also I have 17 others that maybe could work.
Yeah.
And maybe be better. And also I could additionally make up anything, an infinite amount of things in this moment, or one of those decisions is to not do it, as you said earlier. One of the decisions is to just ignore this thing completely.
Not doing something is a fantastic choice. That is always great. And also it comes back to like, a lot of stock lines for street performers and magicians tend to like be reacting to hecklers or certain situations, interruptions and stuff. For those in the second part of the book, I really talk about like, you don't always need to go with the joke. You should be prepared, but it shouldn't always be a joke, right? And so you can act like, you know, this guy just heckled me or whatever it is. And the very specifics of what the person said will determine, do I need to say a joke? Do I need to respond? Do I need to be more honest? Do I need to act wounded? Like, those are all different paths that you can go, and coming with the experience of being able to look at it and know, like, I can see where I'm 3 steps ahead of how this interaction is going to go, because I know, you know, I've done this before. And so I need to do this now. I need to take the hit, because if I say the joke now, people are going to think I'm a jerk. I got to let him, you know, I need to, or maybe I recognize the only reason that he's making fun of me is because I was kind of mean to his girlfriend a little bit earlier. So I actually owe him this, right? Like, oh, that's fair, you know, and recognize that as soon as he gets even, he's going to leave me alone, because that's the reason he heckled.
Yeah. And so again, in all of those things of like that's so cool. Like, you just went into this like great. So like, it's like being understanding that of how fast those things happen. Like, I understand that was like, the past 5 minutes of what we just talked about was a snap of a finger, was half a second decision, and you play those all out. It seems impossible. Like, and especially maybe for a new performer, or even somebody who wants to go to a networking event and they're playing out all these things and they're worried about going and introducing themselves to someone. It's like the same thing.
It does happen fast, but also I think, like, if you're on stage very often, an interruption will have some sort of laugh or something. Like, you have that moment while everyone else is adjusting to it, that you can, or reacting to it, so that you can think ahead. Also think back to, like, my dad has done a lot of like TV work, and I remember he like TV appearances, he didn't do that type of stuff, but I remember he got a note, like, when I was younger, about like, in an interview, to take a moment to repeat the interviewer's question back to them, and while that's happening, to think about what the best solution, the best response would be. So that buys you some extra time as well. Just thought of that. Wow, I haven't thought about that since, like, I don't know, high school.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I always I remember, like, back in the day, this is like it was pretty relevant to thinking about when I was first starting doing like magic tricks, and like just like walking up like table side doing card tricks or something, or walking up to people, and there was something that resonated with me, and it was from like, I guess this is probably like, this isn't even a thing anymore, because I think the world realized how like creepy and terrible these people were. But there was that era of like pickup artists.
Yeah.
In like 2004, there was like a MTV show, and it was they were like really terrible people, but like there was some really like interesting like psychological things. One of the things that I remember was like the 2-second rule, where it was in their context. It was like, hey, if you see someone at a bar you want to go talk to, you're not allowed to like think of a line. You have 2 seconds to say, hey, cool shirt.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing for me to utilize in performing, of like, sometimes I don't need to like do all these things. Like, if someone does something funny, maybe the first thing that I think of, like, oh, that was funny, and I just say, hey, that was funny.
Honesty is very important. One of the, especially in improv right now, like improv classes, they very much train this idea of like, the honest answer is the one you should go with, and not the funny answer. Like, if you try to be too clever, oftentimes that won't work. It's so funny you bring up the pickup artist stuff, because I never applied that towards like dating, but the game is a magic book. It is written exactly the same way, of like, if this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do this. And there are some interesting, like, my biggest takeaway from that was actually when I was doing walk around magic. He's like, you never approach the person that, like, the woman you want to talk to. You approach her friend, or you try to get them interested later on, like inadvertently, right? You be interesting to people around them, and then that draws them in. I would apply that to at like corporate events, where like the CEO, who's never the person that booked you, right? And they don't care about you, and there's a million people talking to you. And if you go up and walk, and I found it really difficult to walk up to them, especially when I was younger, it's like, who the hell is this kid, right? And get them to take me seriously. But if so, it was like, okay, I need to perform for the CEO. I would go to the group next to him and just and then make him, and then that's what pulls it in. So it's that type of thing. But there's some great psychology in there. Just don't apply it to trying to trick women into.
Guys, don't be creepers, guys.
And spoiler, the entire point of that book, which is half novel, is like just be yourself. Is like where he eventually gets to.
Yeah, and I love that. And so we'll take a moment here to say, because we're rocking through this here. We'll take a moment here for the people who are watching live. We'll open this up in a few moments to Q&A if you have a specific line or something that you want to like work through in real time, or if you have just a general question about like the psychology of thinking on your feet or anything that we've been talking about for the people that are watching live. Feel free to drop a comment. And
I see one of my high school teachers is actually in the chat right now. It's funny. I'm actually doing a webinar with my high school theater thing right after this.
Is this Danny, comedy magician that needed this info for years? There's nothing more fun than writing your own jokes and gags and having them kill. So that's like a powerful thing. It was like the reward is there.
It's so good. And like the other thing too is like every time you say a stock line, you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to say, hi Karen. It's so weird. Mrs. Sword is that's her name. Like she's not Karen. It's every time you write, you steal a line, whether or not it's a stock line or you're just stealing it from someone else, you're denying yourself the opportunity to create something new and throw something else out there that will be rewarding, not only for the audience, because they will have never heard it, but for yourself. I love coming up with funny stuff or interesting ideas. Wow, this is cool. Way better than I ever liked saying whatever hack lines I did growing up.
How about this one? My buddy Jeff said, I'm a magician. I made my dinner disappear. How's that for a stock line?
Yeah, I see. I've never heard that before. That is, but actually, this is a great thing. This is a great thing of the obvious jokes. And I don't explicitly talk about, I kind of hint on this. As a magician, people make this type of stuff to me all the time of like, oh, can you make my wife disappear? Or whenever something goes wrong, it's like, well, ask him to do it. It's a magician, right? And every profession has this, right? Lawyers get the same type of, that's the last thing I'll say. Psychologists, right? So if you want to stand out and not be generic, and I think get people to kind of like you a little bit more. When you meet someone, don't make the obvious joke, right? Like when I meet someone and it's introduced that I'm a magician, and they just go, oh, that's cool, and move on. That's the best thing you could do, right? I don't want to talk and answer all these bajillion questions that I do all the time because it's all my own social situation, right? Like it's my day off. I don't want to show you a trick, right? I don't want to talk about, no, I don't do kids shows, right? So I'm always looking for opportunities to avoid making obvious jokes in social situations. Not telling, oh, hey, Zeus, I heard you might come back. It's like, don't do that stuff. Just be real with people.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff, that wasn't really aimed at you. That's what most people do.
That's my buddy from high school, and he's not a magician or a performer. Mm-hmm. He was just being silly. So, but that is funny because it's like he was kind of making fun of that whole world, but it's funny because it's like you don't realize how many people do that and think they're actually being funny.
And the thing about that is when we make these jokes to each other, and whether or not it's joking with a magician or a juggler or a doctor, whatever, right? Like all I get from that is like, I'm trying to connect with you, right? Like I'm trying to connect. And it just so happens that so often we choose the most generic pathways to connect on each other. And it's just kind of like, being a performer, I always want to be more interesting. I don't want to do the obvious joke. I want to do something a little bit different. But I always read that, when people say whatever hack line to me in social situations, I just take it as like, this person's just trying to connect with me. That's a good thing. The context of this joke is good. They just want to connect and show that they're listening.
Yeah, that's a nice like thing to realize. Like so many people, whether people come up to you or post a Facebook comment or something, it's like, oh, they just want to be part of that. Like sometimes you're like, oh, this guy's being a jerk off or something, but it's like, oh, they just want to be part of this thing that I have. And it's like you just have this wrong perspective sometimes that you can switch. And from earlier, I wanted to drop in of like one of these ideas of just being in that moment and being able to utilize the moment. I remember I was performing at this theme park summer or two ago, and it just became so silly. Like I just turned into doing these silly, fun things, being in the moment. And I've talked about it before, but I think it'll be relevant, particularly right here. Of like, I just started doing like dumb things on stage, like just juggling, but like not at all, like not impressive. And I was like, oh, I'll do this. And then I ran over and like just did just like 3 objects. And it was just like, okay, like I was just on like a big unicycle, like doing way more stuff. And then we started playing this game of them just like overly cheering for me doing dumb things. And it was like a game that we started playing. And I was like, oh, and I started just going crazy over it of like, oh, you guys are just going to cheer for anything I do. And then I was like, oh, juggling. And then it came to the point where I sat on the stairs of the stage and I was like, let's hear it for the stairs. And then everyone was like, yeah. And then I'll remember this for the rest of my life. There was a group, and it was a theme park. So like kids are they're on summer break and they're willing to be silly and have fun, which is often how an audience is when they're at a show. Like they're willing to play along and have fun with you.
Yeah.
And I just remember they were like probably like, middle school or early high school age kids. Like they weren't like 4 years old, but they were just like, they came up after the show. They were like, let's hear it for the stairs. Of all the stuff I was on a 6-foot unicycle. I was juggling fire on a ball, and I was doing all these crazy things that I thought were important. But I was willing to just abandon all that and be like, oh, these guys just want to play this dumb game with me that I'm going to cheer for just random objects in this theater. And that was the thing that they took away. They're like, the stairs. I was like,
t-shirts.
Probably the rest of the day they were out in the theme park. Every time they went up the stairs, they were like, the stairs. And I was just like, so brilliant.
Yeah, that group of friends they're probably joking about that now, right? Like anytime one of their friends sits down on a stair, they're probably making that joke, right? It's living on longer than, a lot of the other hack lines that we're stealing.
Right. And it's not, and I think what I was thinking of that, it wasn't something that sitting at home I could have ever written. Or thought about like, I'm going to make them cheer for random objects in this room and force them to do it. It was because they started doing it, and then I built upon it. And I like couldn't do it in another show. So
not with the same thing. I mean, you are always going to come up with new things on stage too. But by the end of the book, it's really talking about like feedback loops of recording your shows, listening to the recordings to then see what your new jokes are getting reactions to and how to tweak them, but also to do exactly that there's probably something in that whole bit that you could probably reuse and apply somewhere else, or like, wow, I perform here annually. Was that story just one performance, or was that like over several performances? That was like a bit you did for the
that was like I was there for like 9 days or something, doing 3 shows a day. So I utilized it. It was interesting because I kind of like tied into that thing of like, kind of again, like doing a bit of a thing of like, I kind of like explored a lot of that thing of like, I was just on a unicycle doing something really hard. And they're like, cool. And then they cheer the most about me, like kind of not making fun of
it. I love those gigs where you are, festivals and things like that, where you do a long run of multiple shows with one specific area, especially if there's something weird like that around you that you can take advantage of. Like when I first sit down, like, I have some killer jokes about bounce houses because there was a giant bounce house right next to a stage at some gig. And I would just sit there and I would just like, all right, what are some funny things, right? Like to joke about bounce houses. I'd mess with and be like, you realize like every bounce house is just one pin away from becoming an escape room, right? Like, don't mess with me, dude. Like, and there was like, there's it's in my notebook. And next time and it's all on my phone too. So like next time I show up to a gig and there's a bounce house, man, I got, a whole extra minute and a half of material on it. That again I created that's going to be a lot more fun. There was one other thing you said, but let me come back. Oh yeah, just the idea of building up a bit and then being able to go back and mine it for new stuff to then do in, right? Like you listen to your show is going to allow you to find stock lines and stolen material, but also find other moments that were like, every time I listen to thing, there's always like one moment on stage where it's like, I don't like this moment. Like this is always weird. And in that moment, like on stage, I'm like, oh man, I wish I was doing something else here, but I'm on stage, so I can't sit down and stop and write it. But if you listen back to your show, you get to that point, you'd be like, all right, now's the time to sit down and figure this out.
Yeah. And so on that specifically, what do you, so on a specific, like maybe like even like specific tools of how that works, and it's going to be different for everyone, but how does that actually, you know, it's like, again, it's easy to be like, oh, cool, listen back and then like kind of write it out. Do you have some like even digging in specifically to deeper of even not just like specifically to the lines, but just in feedback of like, hey, I did this show. And most entertainers and most everyone in any situation, again, I'll do like, there's a lot of even more people that go to a networking event and then they get home and they're kicking themselves because they're like, I could have said this. And then they end up kicking themselves or they miss that opportunity. So do you have any tools or mechanisms of like, cool, that sucked because I missed this opportunity, but instead of kicking yourself, utilize that feedback to improve for the next show or meeting or
figure out
event,
a way
whatever.
to be able to write as much as possible. Like, so I have, starting for recording, right? Like I have an app on my watch called Just Press Record app. It's like $5. It's amazing. There's probably other similar ones too, but I literally just on my watch, I have a button, record button. That means as soon as I walk out on stage, I go and it records everything. And you know, so I can record every show, not visual. I don't actually need video that often. I just need to hear things. And then also if I'm out and like I'm walking away from that networking gig and I have that idea, I can just say it into my watch, that line. And then about every like week or so, weekish is not a correct word, I don't believe. Every week or so, I just go through my most recent like voice memos and I just port them over to I use Evernote, which is a great app that just organizes notes and stuff like that. And then I'll just be like, all right, cool. That was my line. And you write it down. Whatever gets you to record stuff, whatever gets you to write is the way you should use, right? Like if you want to do everything pen and paper, great. I use some of that, but I don't use all of it, right? If you only want to work on a computer, great. Just figure out whatever process gets you to write, gets you to record. You need three things. One, to be able to write down, record ideas anywhere. For most people, that'll just be your phone, right? Two is being able to reorganize ideas and flesh them out. And then three is like being able to like write an actual script, which you will need to do sometimes. I don't have written down scripts for everything in my show, but I have for a lot of the major segments. And for like trade shows, I also have to send a thing out.
Cool. Yeah. One of the things that so specific into the tool thing, because like one of the things I was doing for a while was like especially when I was living out in LA, I was just driving a lot. Like obviously if you're driving, especially in LA, like you can't like go do something. So having tools like that, I actually did just the standard like notes app. And instead of doing a voice memo, I would just do voice to text.
Yeah.
And I would just like have my phone in my hand and like oftentimes drive if you're in traffic and you're stopped. And like, obviously if it's like safe to even hold your phone or if it's just like on the thing, you can just talk and it'll have a text. Yeah. No, you don't even have to have it in your hand and you can like pretty safely like record stuff. Again, if you have a button, there's like so many ways that you can like not be putting yourself into harm by like trying to write something down. Or something.
Dying over. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. But like being ready, like, okay, I have the notebook app or the voice memo app, like on my home screen, boom, I just hit it. And if I'm like going for a jog, it can just be in my headphones or my watch or whatever. So I think that's really essential because there's so many times I'm like, well, I can't, this is so good. There's no way I'm going to forget this. And like 10 seconds later, I'm like, what was I just thinking? That was really good.
I had this writing jokes earlier where I had an idea and then I was like, oh, let me finish writing this one line. And by the time I hit period, I had forgotten the idea. I should have just stopped and just typed it in the middle of the other sentence to record it. Yeah, you always forget stuff. Like just everyone's human. You're gonna forget things, and so writing them down, recording them, and then just taking about it takes 7 minutes to sit down and clear out my voice recorder app. And then you just have that stuff and it just sorts into different areas and sometimes it's garbage, right? And you just throw it out and all right, whatever.
It's great. Awesome. So do you have any other specifics? So we'll do a final last call. I think people are just like people have gears are spinning right now. I think they're ready. They're ready to rock.
Good feedback.
So we'll give a last call here for the people who are watching and listening live to drop a comment if you have any specific thoughts for us to kind of tie this all together with. And if not, if they're just like really, I think a lot of people are really just rocking right now and enjoying this.
Probably
So
off writing.
do you have a couple maybe just in general tie-ups that some of the stuff that you and this was something that you were able to now, like in recent times, like most of all of your gigs kind of like went away instantly without warning. So you were able to, and it's like you probably, because you have that exercise built into you of coming up with new ideas and stuff, and you were able to make this book in a time when people are like, everyone's working on their show right now.
Yeah. That's how I came up with the book ideas. I wrote down 10 ideas. Thanks, Dante. Dante's a great Bay Area kids performer, fantastic magician, hates card tricks, does not do card tricks, which is probably for the best. Less people should do card tricks. How I came up with the book was I wrote down 10 different ideas I want to write something. I want a project. I started compiling the book the day that shelter in place went into effect here in the Bay Area. And I was like, all right, what am I going to write? And this was the best of the ideas. So that's what I did. You can apply the same process to anything. It's how I come up with new ideas, this brainstorming, throw ideas, and whatever you're looking for, one of them will hit it. One of them will be the most what you were looking for on that page. So I do it to determine themes for new shows, or what, like if I'm like, I don't even know what trick I want to work on right now, I'll write down 10 tricks that seem cool, and then I'll pick the one that gets me most excited in that moment. You can do this for anything, absolutely anything, this brainstorming writing session, and then the polishing and stuff just really kind of comes with experience. And there's a lot of great resources out there on, like, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of joke writing, like, oh, here's the assumption that the premise is setting up, and here's how you shatter it, right? Like, you can look online and find a lot of stuff about that specific. But this book really is about specific issue of how to develop this feedback loop of recording shows. How do you start coming up with ideas, and what can you identify the problem issues? I use stock lines. It could be, for like a realtor, like what are the jokes that I'm saying, or the lines that I'm saying that are so commonplace that people are writing me off because that's they're just used to this. How do you not be generic? I think that's a good thing.
It's great. I love it. And I love that kind of that was cool where you went in there, like you were just ready. Again, it was like your gears are spinning to be ready to take advantage of any situation and it's so cool. If like, oh, you do that exercise in writing your lines, writing your jokes, it's going to make you ready to, at some point, if you're a magician, you're just going to do a trick on stage and be like, well, I didn't even I just organically skipped that bit that I was going to do and did a different bit because you just, intuitively, but it was based on being able to see that opportunity and of what was available. And it's going to bridge way beyond magicians, jugglers, performers, motivational speaker, networking events, job interviews, you know, and it's like that, the idea, what you're talking about is fundamentally here in our world, and leveraging out into so many awesome things. So I hope people can kind of see that that it's the value in it beyond writing a joke in a magic show,
right? Yeah,
like, if that's what it is, good, great. But again, being even more relevant in the world is even better.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone. I'm talking to high school students tonight, theater students, and it's like, look, some of you guys are only in this theater class because you want to become president, and this just makes you look, weird thing. But like, everyone, if you're going to be successful in life, you're going to accept an award on stage. You're going to give a speech at some point in your life, right? You can apply this process to that, right? Of like, what are the generic things that people do in a speech, in whether or not that's an award ceremony or a wedding or whatnot, right? Like, we all have to do this. So this process, I think, really can apply to everywhere. And again, some of the thinking behind avoiding common missteps of taking obvious jokes and and really, you know, I think you should take accountability for what you say and the ideas you communicate. And if you're stealing other people's ideas, you're communicating ideas that you probably have not thought about. When you sit down and start thinking about your own stuff, you'll be communicating your own voice and your own ideas. And I think that's something that everyone should be doing more of.
Yeah. Awesome. Perfect tie up there.
Great.
There we go. Awesome. So yeah, we'll tie this up here. Thanks again so much for sharing. Thanks for people who are watching and listening live. As always, we, you know, the live streams are kind of really just a bonus part of this. So something special for the audience who's available to catch it. But if you aren't catching them live, the videos are available on YouTube. And then also, if you just listen to things when you're out running, you can go onto any podcast platform, Spotify, iTunes, Apple, and listen to these conversations and previous ones. And probably from when there was a initial podcast interview with us from like probably 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was the third episode.
That's right. Yeah, who knows? That talk about like listening back to things and it's like cringy. I listen to my old stuff and I'm like, ugh. But it's like, wow, it's so cool of like, oh, I hate this, but it's like, oh, well, I needed to do that and that and that, and we're coming up on 100 episodes of this podcast.
That's
and
fantastic.
It's like real over years of being somewhat inconsistent, but it's awesome and it all relevant to like just that constant improvement.
I just have so much admiration for you for doing, because the consistency thing's so difficult to like sit down and put this out all the time. Like I have so many friends who are really talented that just can't get a schedule together, and so they start up a project, then it dies in 2 weeks, and it's like the fact you've been doing this almost 100 episodes that's amazing, man. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for sharing all your great stuff. So final thing, so people want to find a little bit more about you, where can they find you? And then second thing, the book, obviously. What's the best spot to dig into the book?
So I have a website, ryankanemagic.com. That's Kane, K-A-N-E. If you go to ryankanemagic.com/the book, then you can get it there. It's available on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and type in "out of stock Ryan Kane," it'll pop up. That's the fastest way to do that. And then if you want to follow me, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, where I am most active, it is Ryan Kane Magic on that as well. So K-A-N-E. Although it'd be really funny if it was spelled differently. Like I was like C-A-N-E or like C-A-I-N on different ones, just to be annoying.
To make it hard.
Just to be like, why? You know? Be interesting.
Yeah. Make it difficult for people. That's what magicians do.
Right. Why? Because I'm a magician.
That's what some magicians do. They just try to annoy their audience.
So, I've seen a couple of them.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you, audience, for paying attention and playing along. And that's it for now. Catch you on the next one. See ya.
Peace.